Story recapped here. Today I'm going to explain a horror film called The Free Fall. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. For their parents' anniversary, Sara plans to celebrate with her parents at their family home. However, her sister Julie has no intentions of going despite the important occasion. At home, Sara doesn't find her parents anywhere, despite the fancily arranged dining table. Upon further inspection, she finds her parents inside their bedroom. Sara stands in horror as she sees her mother in a bloody wedding dress, stabbing her husband to death. Furthermore, she watches as her mother slits her own throat. Because of the traumatic incident, Sara tries to take her own life. However, she wakes up in her own bed being taken care of by her husband, Nick. But Sara notices that she can't remember anything else from her life. Despite this, Nick gently walks her through the hazy memories. It turns out he was the one who found her in the tub, and the memory loss might have come from the extreme blood loss. However, Sara doesn't seem to recall the attempt either. When Sara sees the bloody bandages on her wrist, she starts panicking, but Nick is immediately thoughtful and by her side. At night, Sara notices a silhouette leaving the room. Thinking it was Nick, she follows it. Suddenly, she sees the ghost of her bloodied mother and father, but this was all just a nightmare. When she wakes up, Nick gives her a pill to help her relax. Without even thinking about it, Sara takes the pill right away. Then, Nick unwraps her wrist bandage to kiss her wound, but this gives Sara a memory of herself crawling out of the tub. Later, Sara walks around the house and sees Nick talking to the house helper, Rose. Suddenly, the phone rings, so she answers it right away. The person on the other line keeps calling for her, but they can't seem to communicate properly. When Nick notices her talking on the phone, he immediately hangs up, but not before telling the caller to stop bothering them. Furthermore, Nick asks Sara if she remembers anything about her parents, but much to Nick's surprise, she doesn't even remember their death. So he explains everything that happened before her incident. It turns out that after their parents' death, Julie took everything from the inheritance and only left Sara with the house. Later, Sara tells Nick that she doesn't remember anything about their relationship. Nick tries to tell her about their memories together, but Sara can't recall any of them. Still, Nick is optimistic that Sara will remember it soon. After taking a shower, Sara explores the house, but when she tries to go to the third floor, Rose stops her. Apparently, Nick told Rose to keep the door to the third floor locked because it has access to the roof, afraid that Sara might attempt again. Sara accepts it as it is. However, she asks Rose about the grandfather clock they've always had, but Rose tells her that there's never been a grandfather clock. Still, Sara is certain that they had one and even hears it from time to time, so Rose just tells her to rest. However, Sara keeps noticing weird things missing from their house. With that, she asks Nick where their family portraits are. So, Nick tells her that he removed them so that Sara doesn't remember any more bad memories. Furthermore, Sara notices that the bathtub is missing, where she supposedly tried to take her life. Again, Nick tells her that he had it removed. Despite that, Sara still feels like everything is just a strange dream. At night, Sara can't sleep because of nightmares, so she gets up and goes to the bathroom. There, she doesn't notice that her reflection stays put in the mirror. Moreover, she sees herself bloody in the tub. Still, she just wakes up from the nightmare. However, she sees Julie and a doctor examining her. Suddenly, she starts shaking and wakes up, only to see that she's alone. When she looks out the window, she notices Nick chasing away Julie and the doctor. But when he goes to check on Sara, he tells her that they couldn't get inside the house because he sent them away immediately. But Sara is insistent that they were inside the room with her. Worried about Sara's condition, Nick assures her that he won't let anything bad happen to Sara again. That night, the married couple spend some time catching up with each other, and Sara asks Nick what she is like. Because of her lacking memories, Sara tells Nick that they could just start again and make new ones. However, when she tries going to sleep, she gets another nightmare of herself crawling out of the tub and seeing her sister beside her on the bed. The next morning, Sara wakes up with a good feeling, so Nick tells her that she might be ready for a dinner party with friends. Later, Sara tends to the garden and offers to help Rose with chores, but she rudely shakes her off. With that, Sara just leaves. Right away, she asks Nick if there's something wrong with Rose, but he doesn't think so. She tells Nick that Rose snapped at her, so Nick just tells her to snap back because Rose is merely an employee. However, Sara doesn't feel like she's the confrontational type. Because of this, Nick tells her to practice getting angry. He taunts Sara and calls her weakling until she slaps him. The next day, Sara greets a visitor, Tom, a friend of Julie's. He says that Julie's worried about Sara, so he's there to help. Furthermore, he tells Sara to find her way home and shows her a key. After reaching out for the key, Nick appears beside her, and suddenly the man is gone. Moreover, Nick tells her that there was no one there. Due to this, they start arguing because Nick feels like Sara doesn't trust him. But they make up immediately, and Nick gives her a dress for tomorrow's upcoming dinner party. When Sara tries going to sleep, she suffers from another nightmare again. As Sara climbs out of the tub, she sees the memory of her father lying dead on their bed. Suddenly, she finds herself lying there, getting stabbed by her mother and then herself. Also, she sees her sister again, but this time Julie is trying to run away from her. When Sara tries to chase her outside the room, she finds herself inside their shed. There, she notices their old portraits alongside a Bible. Then, the key from Tom falls out of the book. Soon, Sara keeps seeing scenes change from her sister to Tom calling out to her, until finally she wakes up with a loud scream, noticing that Nick has been trying to wake her up. Right away, Nick comforts her. Later that day, Sara tends to the garden while Rose does the laundry. She asks Rose how she gets to the house, so Rose tells her that she takes the bus. Furthermore, Sara follows Nick's advice and attempts to assert her dominance over Rose. However, it doesn't seem to work. Additionally, Rose seems obsessed with Nick, even confessing that she watches Nick showering and thinks that he enjoys it when she does. Because of this, Sara becomes upset and fires Rose. Afterwards, Sara sees a growing vine in the flower bed, so she pulls it out of the ground. But when she notices that it's connected to something gory, she suddenly starts choking and puking out a black goo. However, this was just one of her manic episodes because she probably hallucinated it. Later on, she tries to calm herself in the shower while Nick comforts her from the other side of the shower curtain. Sara apologizes for firing Rose, but Nick just tells her that he's proud because Sara did what she had to do. That night, it's finally time for the dinner party, but Sara is still curious about the key from Tom. But when Nick appears, she hides it back again. After Sara expresses her anxiety, Nick gives her the pill with alcohol, which Sara takes with zero questions again. After getting dressed, Sara lays down for a bit to calm her nerves before joining the party. However, she sees a sudden vision of herself in the mirror. But in the mirror, she's lying down in her nightgown while Julie cries out in front of her. She gets scared, but she still manages to go downstairs and act normal for the party. Before the party starts, Sara notices something in the other room covered with a velvet curtain. When she asks about it, Nick just tells her that it's a surprise for her later. Soon, everyone starts exchanging formalities with Sara, all asking about her condition. When Nick arrives with the food, Rose follows shortly behind, taking credit for the cooking. Because of this, Sara angrily looks at Nick. However, he explains that Rose said that she didn't mention anything bad to Sara. During the dinner, Nick starts talking about cannibalism. Afterward, Nick gives a toast when suddenly Sara notices Tom outside. But Nick doesn't see anyone and convinces her that there's no one there. While everyone starts eating, Rose stares at Sara, so she gets a bit angry. Aside from that, Sara notices Tom outside again and hears him reminding her about the key. Overwhelmed with everything, Sara chugs her drink to calm her nerves. When she asks for a refill, Rose gets her another drink but slips a pill on the glass, something that Sara doesn't notice. As the drug takes effect, the man beside her starts touching her leg. Because Sara is slowly losing her inhibitions, she takes a fork and stabs the man's hand. Instead of getting scared, everyone else just starts laughing and takes the man away. All of a sudden, everyone stands up to start dancing. So, Sara follows along with the joyous atmosphere as she dances with Nick. Still, Tom is trying to call out to her. Therefore, Nick stops her from looking around so much. Soon, Sara passes out. Again, the scene of her crawling out of the tub gets replayed in her memory. Suddenly, her consciousness comes back and she finds herself in a tub full of blood. She sees a still image of the dinner party right in front of her, but it was from when she attacked the man trying to touch her. All the while, Nick is behind her, wearing a pig's head. He starts talking about Sara's place of rebirth and how she called out to him when she tried taking her life. Understandably, Sara is confused. But Nick tries to reassure Sara that everything will be okay once he explains everything at home. When Sara points out that they're at home, Nick tells her they aren't. Scared, Sara runs away from Nick and ignores Rose when she tries to stop her. Furthermore, she doesn't trust Nick anymore and backs away from him. Suddenly, Tom appears with a cross and manages to incapacitate Nick for a moment. However, Tom is thrown back. Despite that, Sara manages to get the key and run upstairs to the third floor. She finds herself in a dark room where mysterious figures keep appearing behind her. As Sara tries to follow the light at the end of the room, demonic versions of Nick's friends grab her from the dark. So, she runs away in fear until she arrives in their library. She sees a book labeled Rose and finds their house helper in various photographs from ages ago, yet still looking the same. When she opens the book, it just has the word apple repeatedly. Then she sees a book titled Sara. Again, it just has the word apple. Suddenly, she hears Tom calling out to her once more, so she walks closer to the window. Then Nick appears behind her, asking if she really wants to end her life. When she looks out the window, she notices Tom calling out to her. Nick tries to manipulate her into staying with him, but Tom urges her to jump. When she looks at her reflection in the window, she sees herself looking wounded. Furthermore, she remembers herself crawling out of the tub again and seeing her parents' death. But instead of seeing her mother stabbing her father, she sees that her mother's hand is getting controlled by Nick, who's wearing a pig's head. He was also the one who made her mother slit her own throat. Still, Nick tries to reassure her that everything will be different and better, but suddenly Tom throws holy water at Nick, burning his face. This was the final factor before Sara finally jumps from the window. When she falls onto the flower bed, she comes back into the actual reality where Tom is conducting an exorcism because Sara is actually possessed. While they try to expel the demon out of her, Julie pleads for it to take her instead. Soon, Tom succeeds in saving Sara, and finally she's back in her actual life. While recuperating from the traumatic experience, Tom tells her that Sara is unique because she can remember being possessed and her experience with Nick. However, Tom reminds her to stop believing the illusion. Moreover, he reminds her to be strong because she's still vulnerable. Once the two sisters are left alone, Julie makes sure to tend to Sara and gives her medicine from the doctor. Also, Julie confronts Sara about her attempt, saying that she was the one who found her in the tub. Additionally, she starts reassuring Sara that everything will be okay. But Sara notices that it's the same words that Nick told her. Then she notices that the pills are the same ones Nick gave her. Sara realizes that the demons must have transferred into Julie's body instead.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.